haven't forgotten, Chairman Rivera.
Madam Chair, I find myself in a very unique position on this board, which is I'm still undecided. I'm never undecided on anything. But this one is tough. As I've lived the last month of this, and if I get one more email thanking us for our vision, whoever wrote that form email, please just change it up. You know, we're in a very interesting spot. When this first started, and my first question to Marshall when he came to my office was, I don't understand why this doesn't work. Is this simply that you just can't get along with South Florida? I mean, why can't a polytechnic branch work? Is this a clash of personalities? Is it a clash of priorities? Is it a void in leadership on one side, both sides? What is the real challenge here? And it's been an interesting dialogue since that point. I've looked at the plans. I'm not confident in the plans. I thank John Temple for his thorough review of the plans. I think he's got a ton of hours in this, and I think he's got a lot of insight there. At the same time, and let me be clear, as a former student body president, I always want to know where the students are, and I'm glad they showed up, and I think they have a compelling interest in what's happening here. At the same time, one thing has become imminently clear in this process, and that is Humpty Dumpty's off the wall. Status quo is not going to work. I'm not crazy about the plan. I don't know that I have confidence in the plan. I don't know if the numbers can be met. I'm very concerned about the accreditation process, and if we move forward with norms resolution, who's going to supervise that accreditation process? Where is that funding going to come from for those classes that we need to go forward? I think there's a lot of issues that need to be looked at if we go forward with norms plan, and I think we can flesh all of that out. We're grown-up people, we can do that. As far as the process, it's actually been kind of pleasant. You know, I know some folks have complained about the politics. I've certainly spoken with many folks up and down the political spectrum and the community spectrum. I've had a good experience on pretty much every occasion. It's been very thoughtful, very professional. Most of the conversations ended up with, we have confidence the board will do the right thing, and if you do the right thing, and if you go through a meaningful process, we'll support you. Whichever side you come down on, we'll support you. So I actually thought the process and the political nature of the process has been pretty healthy. If nothing else, at least some folks know we exist and know our phone numbers. So that's a nice thing. I think the challenge we have is somehow or another we have to go forward. I don't think that we can go back. I think the puzzle's broken and that status quo won't work. And as I listened to your motion, Norm, and, you know, give or take some inserts and excerpts, I think back to Dick Beard's comments. Because Dick said the one thing that I have to agree with. I mean, Norm, your motion says we support the concept of independence if they do this myriad of things, and we can negotiate what those things are, and we can negotiate how and when they're going to be funded and what's going to happen with regard to governance in the meantime, particularly through accreditation. But at some point in time, there needs to be an end point. And there needs to be ongoing supervision through this process. So I am not averse to going forward with something like Norm's motion or Norm's motion under the condition that we would move forward as a board, frankly, Chair Parker, with a task force that you appoint that is engaged to be involved in this process, to make certain these requirements are met. It seems to me that everything Norm has laid out is something of an objective requirement, and that if we're not hitting the numbers, if the budget is crazy, if the architectural fees go over the top, which I don't know if that'll happen. I can tell you on a sidebar, I've worked with Skanska a bunch of times as well, and if they give you a GMP, that's the GMP. I got all the confidence in the world in that team. But I think at the end of the day, there needs to be, if we go forward with Norm's motion, which I am willing to do, as long as it comes back to this board for a final review that says, okay, they're done. I find the motion that Norm is talking about a little open-ended. I don't know when we're finished with this motion. I know folks will say, look, we don't want to come back and have this discussion all over again in 5 years. But I think the only way to make sure, frankly, that John's concerns are met, that we're involved in the budgeting process and the building process, the planning, the curriculum development, is for there to be a final vote of the board at the end that says yes or no, you got there. That's the only way I think this thing works and goes forward. So I will tell you, moving from undecided to I'm willing to go forward, for me is contingent upon a ongoing board involvement in the process from accreditation to curriculum to buildings to budgets, and a final determination by this board that says, okay, we're done. Now it's independent. I don't mind the concept. I don't mind the conversation. I don't think status quo will work, and I'm just not sure we can go back. It may take 5 years. It may take 8 years, but I think this board's engagement needs to be in the entire time. And ultimately, I think there needs to be a final overseeing, okay, you're done, the new university is born, move forward. That's my comments.
Board of people who have all vested interests. He's got one representative from the Board of Trustees. He reports to the president. Who does he report to? And are we going to replace the board? I mean, you got to have a board. Well, first of all, as you know, this thing is messed up. These projections are not credible. The costs are out of control. And what I would like to see, and look at, this is going forward. The money's been funded. A building is going to get built. It's a polytechnic institution. I'm not trying to stop any of that. You can't. The money's there. But I'm telling you, we gotta, and so I'm looking, you know, my pitch here is I'm looking to USF to clean this up. They, you know, the president has control, not exercising it. The president needs to be told to exercise her control, get this thing under control, get this plan done, get this building figured out. I think we should have a review process over that. And then if you want to cut it loose, then I guess we got to propose a new board of trustees that's independent, because the one they have now is not, my opinion. And there's got to be a clear line of who they're going to report to. Who's going to hire and fire them? We can't hire another president. We can't fire a president. So, I mean, you know, with all due respect, Norman, I don't, this is a mess. And I'm looking to the University of South Florida to clean the mess up. And maybe we give them 12 months, maybe we give them, I don't know what it is, but we're not ready now.
Chairman Ramil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I made reference in my remarks to this unique piece of legislation that applies only to USF and gives the campus autonomy on their budget. And then Governor Temple made mention of it as well. And you all might consider, if you're going to go in this direction, you need to get that fixed and need to make it absolutely clear with no ambiguity that the Chancellor reports to the President reports to the Board of Trustees, and we report to the Board of Governors. And you have total review of everything we do and every dollar we spend. And I would have no trouble with it working that way.
Governor.
Remember,
Governor-
just let me ask that. Remember, they're intimidated by this Florida statute, 1004.345. So they've kept their hands off. And I think you all need to understand that before we make any decisions here. I think you need to understand that.
Governor Hussaini?
Madam Chair, if I could ask the maker of the motion, beg him to add on that we will not, because we have such a big issue in front of us that we need to deal with as we go and make sure they're in the right process, that where they're going, all that we will not. Because some concerns came, well, today is politics, tomorrow is, St. Pete, that this board will not consider any suggestion from anybody until further next 5 years, because it's going to take this long to get politics going and up, that we will not consider any suggestion from any other campus or branch for doing anything like this.
Hold on one
Can I
second.
just make a motion?
Hold on one second, Governor
Make a
Frost,
motion
yeah.
to
I guess
comment.
Governor Hussaini asked the maker of the motion if he would accept a friendly amendment regarding some prohibition regarding any other campuses.
That's
Is
correct.
the gist of what he was saying. And the question to the maker of the motion, Governor Tripp, is whether you're interested in entertaining this in your current motion.
With all due respect, I'd rather not do that. I think we're a little confused. If I could have 1 second. First of all, during the accreditation process we're going through, and some of us may have not had the knowledge of that, you can't make a change. So we're not talking about changing status with USF Poly.
Okay, so-
and USF. That's
so they're
not
still
what
in
this
charge.
that's not what this motion says.
That's what the motion says.
What this motion says is that we are putting people on notice that we're okay with independence, but they must first finish SACS accreditation. Then they have to go back to SACS and talk about how they will be managed. That takes a second factor. We're not going down this road in a few weeks. And so I hear what people are saying. The difficulty is, can they work within the system with this group so that the people of that area at the end of the day would step up and say, thank you, USF, for placing us in a position where we now have a wonderful product. We need to stop the name calling and all of that. I think both sides understand that there is a little heavy lifting, but one of the reasons we want in our motion during the transition period to independent status, transitioning to it, the Board of Governors shall monitor the development of the campus. I say monitor because we can't hire and fire personnel. That's not what we do. Talked about that. Could we go hire somebody? Could we go fire somebody? That's not what we do. And it's operations, working in collaboration with the appropriate boards, and we'll talk about it on a semi-annual basis, okay? The second thing, this board shall be consulted of any significant change to the business plan prior to any action being taken. So they've got to come to this board and consult with us before they change anything. I think that gives us the authority that we're looking for. Now,
You want to go next?
can we have some regulations that tweak it a little bit, going forward? Yeah, probably, but I think the concept's there.
But what I added as part of the motion was, everything you said I agree to. All I'm asking is that, do you want to have another branch campus to come to us next month and say, how about us?
Do I? I don't want it to be included. I don't want to muddle up this. I think,
I think we
if
can-
strategic planning
we can make
and
a
our
separate,
new
okay.
officers of this, we are going to have new officers starting tomorrow. If those
I'll take
officers
my-
decide they
Take
want to
that.
lead this board in a little different direction going forward, I think that would be the proper way to do it.
Ava?
Governor Colson.
I'm in support of the motion. I do want to talk to Tico's question because it's, I think it's an important issue. In my view, we ought to put in here the milestones we want met. And if the university is able to meet those milestones, they should have a very high expectation that they're going to become independent. It shouldn't be a whole new process. So we ought to think what the milestones are. And I think that you've captured one. Because otherwise, you're not going to get the community buy-in. I mean, if you want the community buy-in, I believe you want to go raise $50 million or $75 million, they're not going to give it to the branch of USF. That's my opinion. So I have no problem setting the bar high, but I think there should be, if they meet the bar, now they have to come back to us and prove that they've met, that they cleared the bar.
Indeed, I don't want to jump Ava's order, but all I'm saying is prove that you met the bar, and we'll take a vote that says you met the bar.
Okay, I got no
I'm not
problem
adding
with that.
conditions, I'm saying final arbiter and review, so that there are ultimately responsive conversations.
Yeah, I
that
agree
the
with
board's
that.
engagement is seen as supervisory, or at least in a review
We're on
fashion.
the same page.
As opposed to, we say we met it, you say we don't, you don't get to vote.
Right. No, we're on the same page.
Governor
Doesn't there
Yost?
need to be a time frame?
Governor Yost?
Governor Tripp, I would like to suggest a friendly amendment that may or may not work for you. First is, I would, because of the shared governance issues we've talked about, I would like to see something in there about pursuing appropriate shared governance with faculty somewhere in this process, because I think that's the biggest failing I see in the process side at this point. And the other thing under resources, I think two key resources that the faculty pointed out that we don't have on that resource benchmark yet is library resources, which isn't just a place that holds books. This is all those online databases and stuff that those faculty will need, and a sponsored research organization. So I think those are two key resources for this place to be independent. And again, they may get these by contract from USF or wherever. And the other thing is some statement about, improving shared governance.
And Governor Frost, you can think about it, I'll let you know. He's thinking about your recommendation, Governor Yost, and he'll get back with you.
No problem. I
Okay.
see their
Yes.
wheels moving.
Governor Frost.
When I'm listening to this proposed motion, to me, it sounds like you're asking USF to do a lot of work closely, and then spin it off. And that's what you're asking in X number of years, days, or whatever. I just want to know, how will you ever, if she is not now just totally in control, and she cannot get decent faculty, you don't have faculty there, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong, that's really elaborate, where we're talking last meeting that we want to bring in National Academy science people, all kinds of people. How are we going to, with the understanding that eventually it will be a separate unit, eventually, if you meet all of this criteria? You're asking this president to then build this special unit to spin it off. I do not think personally that this is the right way to go at this time. I am for the idea, but I don't think we need to put in all these landmarks. I want the president to come back in 2 years or 3 years to tell us, you've worked it through, this is what it is, period, and then we make a decision. I don't think I'm in this time in a position to vote with A, B, C, and D when we don't have the faculty, we don't really have the students, we don't have the money, we don't have the building, even though the location is perfect.
Okay, Governor Temple.
President Ginshaft, this is a question for you and your chairman of your board. My view of this situation is that you have a chancellor that reports to you who has been, and you have not gotten the reporting that you've asked for on the progress of this. It is, I still say, in my opinion, it's out of control. If you don't get that reporting, well, my view is that your chancellor is incompetent, and I just have to say that. And if you continue to be ignored, if you and your board continue to be ignored and not given the reports you want and the reports that we want to get from you, are you prepared to replace them? Do you have that authority and under what Norman's saying, and are you prepared to take action if you've got an advisory board and a chancellor who's incompetent and not reporting properly?
Let me answer this through the accreditation and the governance structure. One of the items that you're talking about is that when you go to the accreditation group, you say, this is the governance, you know, that the regional chancellors, and by the way, these are, well, the regional chancellor reports to the president reports to the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees reports to the Board of Governors.
Right.
If there is a foul up there, if there is something that goes awry, that, I need to straighten that out. I need to straighten that out. And I must straighten that out, or else it puts the whole 47,000 institution into jeopardy, at risk for accreditation. So yes, I do have the authority, and I need to make sure that that governance structure is in place and is actively working. Yes.
Governor Core?
Thank you.
Oh, did he lose him?
I have three questions. And first to the chair. Madam Chair, are we going to hold this motion, this proposed motion in our hands and be able to read it and understand it, or is it? Or is that not how it works?
We can do that if you'd like. If we can, Michelle, can you work with us? I think that Norm has a motion that was kind of long, and Governor Core is asking if he can take a look at it. Is it possible for us to get copies of that, please, while we're working through this?
Okay,
And
thank you. Okay, and
Debbie?
then just a question to Governor Tripp. So I'm just trying to understand how this might work. Is the proposal that trying to understand what changes right away. Is the proposal that everything stays the same, except there's a promise that when accreditation happens, at that point in time, there's a new university? Is that how it works?
No.
Yes, and by the way, welcome. Haven't had an opportunity
Thank you.
to meet you before. And they must meet the criteria that they set forth in their business plan, which includes the FTE. They have to have the things in place, et cetera. So what we're saying is that you're saying you can do this, and you need to do this, and if you do this, you will have your independence.
Okay. So just
We're not saying tomorrow that
Yep.
Judy does not have responsibility for the organization.
Okay.
And we're not saying that the board takes over the authority to hire or fire, because I don't believe we have the authority to hire or fire employees. So I was not trying to step in and do that.
Okay.
Now,
Good.
I disagree with John that reports couldn't come. I'm chair of audit and compliance. No one ever asked me, okay, and said to me, I cannot get any accounting or compliance reports from this unit. I haven't heard that before. And I believe the state auditor general looks at their numbers like they do everybody else. and then somebody asks us, to speak to whoever at Polytech because we want to see what they're doing, we would have done that if they were refusing to to deal with
Okay.
USF.
So just to follow up, and I'm almost done. I'm just looking for a head nod. We approve this motion. Nothing changes. At some point in the future, if accreditation happens and certain business conditions of the business plan are met, then what happens then? Does it happen automatically, or is there another action?
We
That's my
would be monitoring, and we're going along, and under this motion, once they reach those criteria, then they have to go and apply to SACS again
Okay.
to become independent and operate themselves. They have to get that approval too. If
Okay.
SACS finally approves that, is that right, Frank? You're an expert on this. If they finally approve that, then they have their true independence.
Okay, this may just be new guy problems, but I'm just trying to understand. So it seems to me that there's a threshold here that has to do with SACS, right? And so maybe Chancellor Brogan can answer, but I've just wondered, what's the process to get that approval?
It's a good question. What in essence you're doing is laying out a pathway for university status, but with, in my opinion, clear and definable governance structures that exist today and threshold criteria that must be met over time. There are two pieces to accreditation that are germane to this issue. One is the one that has already been laid out, and that is that working with the University of South Florida, this being a campus, by statute, I remind everybody, this is already statutorily created and laid out, that as one of the three campuses of the University of South Florida, the Polytech must first, under this provision that Governor Tripp has laid out, continue to seek separate accreditation status as a campus of the University of South Florida, just as already has Sarasota Manatee and St. Pete, campus of USF.
That is in statute.
And all that's laid out in statute. So that would be one of the threshold criteria, that they would continue to work under current statute to meet that first major obligation, which is the statutorily required status of separate accreditation as a campus of USF. Also laid out in the motion are a number of additional threshold criteria which would have to be met relative to, and I think you've got that now, relative to buildings, numbers of STEM related fields and graduates, et cetera, et cetera. According to the way the motion is laid out, once those threshold criteria have all been met, at that point, the institution would have achieved its ability to change and go after from separate accreditation with SACS as a campus of USF and re-petition SACS for university accreditation status. Two steps. Two steps. Does that help?
It helps a lot.
Okay.
And Ava?
Senator,
I'm sorry.
hold on one second. Senator Alexander, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you wanted to make a comment.
Things have been said as though the statute is a limitation on the control of USF, and it's a very minor limitation, and it is exactly the same statute that St. Petersburg had prior to this being put in place for Polytech. So I think some of the there's been a lot of mischaracterizations about the limit of USF's board to control this campus. I would tell you that the contract for this building was approved by the facilities folks in Tampa, was negotiated by the facilities folks in Tampa. So if there's a problem with this Polytech campus, it gets to the current model for how this thing's been governed. And I just hope that if we're going to do this, that we do be clear that we're moving forward to independence. This is a direction to go independent. and to take this institution forward as an independent institution. And I hope that whatever steward is in charge of the transition, that they do that in a faithful way to the decision, if that's the decision of the board, they do it in a very faithful way. I have serious concerns about USF being able to fill that role, but I believe that role can be filled and should be filled if that's your decision. But we shouldn't be playing around. If you're going to do it, let's do it. Set out the goals, achieve the goals. The goals are achievable with the right sort of stewardship, and they ought to be done as succinctly as possible. But I just felt I need to clarify a couple issues.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Duncan. You passed. Governor Perez.
Madam Chair,
Then I'll come back to you.
I would
Sure.
like to propose an amendment to this motion which would provide for, and I would let our general counsel draft the appropriate language, a final review and recognition of independence by this board. I think if we don't have that final review and recognition of independence, when these objective criteria are met, it will be very difficult to monitor the process, to be involved in review. I'm not talking about a new form of governance. I'm not talking about anything other than somebody has to say, you're finished. And I think this board ought to be that body. And without that, I'm not comfortable. I mean, I think that if we don't have a committee of this board moving forward from tomorrow on, working with the USF, working with the Polytechnic, making sure that many of John's very valid concerns are dealt with, I think the tool to make sure that that cooperation occurs is that ultimate vote. And I'd like to move to amend the motion to include that final level of review and approval, subject only to the objective criterias, whatever we determine they are, that are laid out in this motion.
Wait, well, hold on. The friendly amendment has to first be accepted by the person who made the motion, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be, I mean, if Norm doesn't want it, we can talk about it.
May I have a question? I have a question.
I don't want to be negative. All I want to make sure is what we're saying is that if they meet the objectives we've set forth in here, it will come back to us for the sole purpose of saying you've met the objectives, you're now independent.
I would look to our general counsel to draft that language.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
That's what I'm looking
I would
for.
accept that amendment so that we make sure we don't start rethinking the criteria or
Not the
anything
goal.
like that.
What-
This group knows if they meet A, then when time comes, they're approved. But we will, just like we do with the election of a president, the boards of trustees elect the president, and he comes in and we say,
Norm,
Yes.
I concur fully. Look, and I'm very sensitive to Dean's comment that says this will make it difficult for fundraising if they think there's a second level of review and everything else. That's not the goal. The goal is to make certain that whatever group is appointed by the chair to work with both institutions through this transition process has access and response and cooperation. And the only way to make sure there is that input and communication is to know that ultimately there is a final review.
Okay, so,
I will accept that if the second will accept it.
okay, so at this point, the person who made the motion, Governor Tripp, has accepted, as well as the person who provided the second, Governor Martin. And right now, our general counsel is adopting the language to reflect the amendment in the motion. So that's where we are, right? I'm looking to my left here, my Robert's
Madam
rule.
Chair, I would like to call the issue.
Okay.
I would ask the chair to call the issue.
There's no debate on the call.
At this point, looking one more time to my left for my Robert Rules person, if one guy's called the question.
Well, you didn't recognize him to call the question. He called the question. I mean,
And
it's
I
up to
didn't-
you. If you feel like you recognized him, then the question is called. If not, you can go to John.
Governor Tripp, I didn't recognize you. Okay. Now, Governor Temple, here you go. It's yours. You can say
You're
it.
holding up my dinner.
Sir? I know. Exactly, but you know, but.
And I'm in trouble with my wife. I got a ton of questions about, I don't trust what's in here. I want to find out what that architectural contract says. I want to find out what the master plan looks like. I want to see those construction costs. Do I have the right to do that as a governor? You said something about the chairman's going to appoint
Well, I'm asking the
somebody
chairman to do that.
to get involved in this, and I want to know if that's right, or if that's part of this, or what.
Well, here's how I
What
read
did you
this.
mean, Norman?
In response,
The Board of Governors shall monitor.
Well,
What does that mean?
Vicky's drafting.
Does that mean I can ask all those questions?
here's a couple, here's my,
'Cause
let
I'm
me ask
very
you.
concerned about this.
Since you made the motion, you certainly can respond if you like, Governor Tripp, but if I might just help you out a little bit, Governor Temple, my belief is that the way this is set up, as has previously been stated, it's not as if Polytech becomes independent tomorrow. It has several hurdles that it has to cross, and as long as it is crossing those hurdles, it's going to be incubated, by USF or another university. So the question is, so to answer your question, is that as the president indicated, there's a governance structure that's set up, and then ultimately, particularly as the chair indicated, the chairman of the board answers to the Board of Governors.
President
So-
Genseth,
so
really,
excuse
the
me.
question's from me to you.
Madam
This
Chair.
is legal speak, excuse me. I'm going to ask a lot of those questions, and I'm going to expect answers. And do you feel do you have a problem with that? As he's written under 7?
At this,
Would you or your chairman have a problem with that? Okay.
so Governor, I'm not
Not at all.
recognizing Governor Tripp. I'm recognizing you now, if you'd like to do anything.
Could we call the question?
Yes. So can you please read, I guess, the question is, do you all need for Vicky to read the entire motion, or do you need for her just to read the newest language that reflects the amendment as offered by Governor Perez?
language.
Just the newest language. So if you would, read the newest language, Vicky?
Thank you, Governor Parker. Once the foregoing criteria have been met, Polytechnic shall notify the board, and the board shall conduct a final review to confirm the criteria have been satisfied.
Acceptable to me.
Are there any questions about the language?
We take the final look and say, yes, you've met the criteria.
Only,
Can you read it one more time, please, Vicky?
Certainly. Once the foregoing criteria have been met, Polytechnic shall notify the board, and the board shall conduct a final review to confirm the criteria have been satisfied.
Any other questions at this point?
I would just request, Madam Chair, that if we move forward in this direction, and it seems that we are, that you or your successor tomorrow appoint a task force that is going to be engaged and involved and work through this for the next several years with the universities. It's going to be important.
What I'll do is, there'll be a new chair tomorrow, and I'll be sure and pass that message on.
There's still time tonight, Madam Chair.
Oh, I forgot, I'm chair to January.
You
Oh, my
are.
God.
Is that going to be in a motion, or what?
No, I think
No,
she's
it's-
chair until January.
Yeah.
But it's going to be in the minutes.
Well,
I want what you said to be in the minutes.
well, right now, it's a recommendation from one of the members.
John, don't vote for a new chair
Yeah.
unless he agrees to do that.
I think we got to vote, right?
Okay. So at this point, there's a motion on the floor that specifically applies to the request as it relates to the Polytech campus. I know that there have been other questions about other campuses, so I'm going to remind you that if you're interested in doing that, that you will have an opportunity after we vote on this motion.
Yeah, I'd like to do
Okay,
that.
so I just want to mention that to you. So, all in favor of the motion signify. Sure, it's no problem. Actually, this is the second request I've gotten for a roll call vote, and I don't have any problem with that. Madam Secretary? He said yes.
Yes.
Mr. Corr?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mrs. Frost? Mr. Hosseini?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
He said no.
Okay, thank you. Is Dr. Marshall on the phone? Not there. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson?
Send him a text.
Mr. Rube?
Yes.
Mr. Stavros?
Yes.
Mr. Temple?
No.
Yes, Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Dr. Yost?
Yes.
Vice Chair, Mr. Colson?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. The floor is now open based upon our previous conversation. I will now recognize Governor Husseini.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we will not accept any other application from any branch of any university for independence until we have disposed of this specific case, that they become independent university, or 5 years.
Second.
The motion is made by Governor Husseini and seconded by Governor Beard. Any discussion?
Yes.
Governor Duncan?
I respectfully disagree with that approach, having been part of what seemed like a very well thought out idea before when we were doing the Pappas report, that we just had to undo that. It's been a very long day. I think that is a more complicated issue, and I would rather not be trying to kind of throw that kind of major concept together here at the last minute, because I think it just, we need to let the process get going, and we can address that when we've had time to really fully debate it and deal with the strategic plan.
Governor Tripp?
Madam Chair, with all respect, I would hope that we would take that up after we have a new administration, and that we think about that in terms of the strategic plan, and we maybe want to, I think we're addressing in the strategic plan that we want to continue with a process and not put a hard line on ourselves again.
The University of South Florida needs to know they can plan. If University of South Florida doesn't know that they want to plan, they want to know where they go, they want to know how they deal with their branches. Tomorrow we may just get somebody else wants to come and says, how about us? And we need to give them they need to settle, they need to work on this process, be done with this. And then we will, in 5 years, I assure you, we can relook at this. And I don't have any problem if you want to take this all on. Look at this tomorrow, because you think that, we're under the, I mean, really. But I just don't,
Dr. Genshaw?
I've not interjected much at all, but I really, really, really support this motion. It is so tumultuous to go through this. I can't tell you the number of, we've actually calculated the number of hours and the press releases and everything. We can't have this kind of turmoil again, so I just wanted to speak in favor of this motion.
Yes.
It is just
I'll recognize him in just a second.
too disruptive and dysfunctional.
Chair will recognize you in a minute.
Just 1 second. The commissioner is back online, and we did a roll call vote, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to vote if you like. So, Mikey, you want to officially call his name?
All right, Commissioner Robinson, the board was voting on the motion the motion to approve the concept and with some criteria stated. Do you want to present your vote?
Yeah, the vote is yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Okay, yes.
Governor, so Dr. Genshaw, did you finish your statement?
Yes, in case you didn't hear, this past month, from the last time you've had a BOG meeting to this time, just the Tampa campus alone spent well over 1,000 hours on this issue alone. This moratorium is so very important. I cannot stress enough how this becomes all, you don't move ahead with your organization with this kind of, with this coming about. Please consider this.
Governor Yost? Governor Yost?
As sympathetic as I am to this, I think it's never a good idea for the board to tie its hands. I would not restrict myself from in the future. I won't be here, but another 9 months, so it won't come up on my watch anyway. I wouldn't restrict your hands in terms of being able to do business in the future because of this.
Governor?
Well, we certainly didn't restrict our hands when we reversed the decision we made not to have any more universities, did we?
Governor Colson?
I have no interest in another university on the Gulf Coast of Florida, within 100 miles in either direction of Tampa. So that's just me personally. Now, the East Coast of Florida has been pretty much ignored the last 30 years. So I don't know how you...
Then put a moratorium on the West Coast of Florida. Please, no more USF.
Or the USF system. So maybe what we...
I'm serious. Put a moratorium on the West Coast then.
Let's call the question.
So, can you repeat the motion, Governor Hussaini?
I don't remember. No, I'll make a motion, Madam Chair, that until we take care of the but the Polytech, that independent or 5 years, that we will not accept any application to process for independent university.
Okay. Let me try this with a voice vote and see if we can get it, okay? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Sounds like the ayes.
Ayes have it.
Ayes have it.
You feel pretty comfortable, Mike, as the secretary, that the ayes have the motion?
You make the call unless somebody calls for a roll call.
Okay, the motion carries, motion passes. Okay. Dr. Saunders, I don't know if we still have a reception waiting for us at
We
this
have a
point.
reception down on the second floor, which is a little deceptive because it's actually 5 flights down if you want to take the stairs. If you want to wait for the elevators, it's there. The presidents are going to go directly to dinner at the Baldwin House and Frank, and I assume the Board of Governors will make up their own decision about going to the reception or their dinner. But the reception is there for people that want. There's a hot breakfast at 7:30 in the morning on the first floor if people would like a hot breakfast.